60% mental and 40% physical.
Math was never our strong suit, but breaking down Ohio State football is. Sit back and join us for Buckeye Grove Instant Access, part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You can do it!
Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Post-game thoughts, immediate analysis, and much, much more to put the big game into perspective. Without any further delay of game, here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Kevin, goddammit.
Hey, welcome to the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon. BIA podcast, Buckeye Grove Instant Access. And it's been a minute since we've been able to do anything that truly is instant access. The Buckeyes haven't been on the field since their Fiesta Bowl loss to Clemson. We don't want to really talk about that one. But have no fear. Football is here. We are just a couple days away from the start of their season. A home game against Nebraska, part of Ohio State's 8+1 Big Ten schedule. Knock on wood, stay healthy, don't make any bad decisions because there's no wiggle room, no safety net when it comes to this schedule, but it seems like it's been more like 80 months and not 8 months, 10 months, however many months since we've seen the Buckeyes on the field. And as we get ready to talk about Ohio State's schedule and in particular the Big Ten East in general, let's bring in our guest, intern extraordinaire, Marcus Horton, and, we're going to get some of his insights as well. Marcus, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It feels good to be in game week. I know Ryan Day said yesterday that felt like forever since he's played an actual game, and that's kind of how it's felt here too. So I'm excited to be in it.
Yeah, exactly. We bring in our interns, and we've gotten into a nice, comfortable schedule of how things would work, and then 2020, and everything kind of went sideways. So it has been it's been a lot of adjusting on the fly or whatnot, but while the meetings have been on Zoom calls and not over at the Woody Hayes facility, I think this is the first week that I could sit there and say actually felt like it had, at least it was grounded in sort of normality. I don't know if I would sit there and say that it's normal, but at least it's grounded in a little bit of normality.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for 2020, it's about as normal as it gets, right? Well,
I guess. For those of you who listened on Monday, we talked about the Big Ten West with Jacob Binge, and now it's the Big Ten East with Marcus Horton. And I think the way that we kind of want to just go through this is we'll address the teams kind of as they appear on Ohio State's schedule in that order. With the West, with you only playing 2 crossovers, we had to kind of just fake it until we made it there. But this one is a little bit easier to kind of go through. And we're going to start with Ohio State's Week 2 opponent, Penn State. Everybody has really circled that game as being the game of the conference. I mean, certainly the Big Ten East, but probably the biggest game in the conference regardless. Apologies to the teams out west, but Ohio State wins this game, and then the Buckeyes should probably be double-digit favorites the rest of the way. Ohio State trips up. There's going to be a lot of work to do at that point because where would Penn State trip up at that point? So, let's kind of get into the Nittany Lions, and they ran into some bad news at the start of this week. Journey Brown, their talented running back, may be done for the season.
Yeah, that was big. And Micah Parsons has already opted out. He's not coming back. He would have been one of the best linebackers in the country for a defense that's probably, if not the top in the Big Ten, one of the top in the Big Ten. They do bring back John Clifford and All-American tight end Pat Freiermuth. And I think the offense is set for somewhat of a bounce-back season after they were a little bit of a down year last year. The defense will be good, as always. They have probably the second most talent in the Big Ten. It's just a matter of that talent showing up against Ohio State because that is the game that matters for both of these teams. It should, with the way the Big Ten East is shaping up, they should be favored in the rest of their games. Penn State's 2 crossover games are Iowa and Nebraska. So they got a bit of a tougher slate than Ohio State. the Iowa game will be big for them, but there's no doubt that they have circled Halloween on their calendar as the most important match.
Yeah, it'll be a whiteout in front of family and cutouts when they play that game. I think so much for the Nittany Lions comes from their quarterback play. And Sean Clifford is a talented quarterback, a native Ohioan, crossed over to go to Pennsylvania because the Buckeyes had turned elsewhere in terms of their quarterback recruiting. He didn't finish the game last year when Ohio State and Penn State played each other. He was dealing with an injury. Penn State brought in their backup. I believe his name is Will Levis, and he ended up doing some things with his legs. But make no mistake, this is Sean Clifford's team. I think the question that I have is I saw Penn State, their offense really shaping up to be one that was going to have a stable of really good running backs, and that they would be able to throw to accentuate that. And now you lose Journey Brown, and they certainly don't have some of the names that you would expect in terms of 2, 3, 4 really solid receivers, at least that I can't think of off the top of my head. But obviously, Pat Freiermuth, the tight end, is a problem. I mean, he is going to be one of the best in the nation, if not the best in the nation. That Penn State offense, I mean, because I think it's really going to come down to a point of you're going to have to just be able to run the track meet with the Buckeyes. I think that Ohio State's offense is just going to be that good this year. They're not going to be a lot of 17-14 types of games unless December really rolls in and they're playing in a foot of snow, kind of like what's going on in Minneapolis right now with them getting 7-8 inches last night. But, all things being equal, I think that it's going to be a matter of offenses are going to have to really go shot for shot with the Buckeyes.
Yeah, and that's the concerning thing with Penn State this season. I mean, they have a good group of running backs from what I've seen. They're solid even without Journey Brown. But you're right, they don't have an explosive receiver, and Clifford is good, but he's not going to lead an offense to 50 points against Ohio State. I mean, it's going to come down to them grinding games out with their running backs and the occasional big hitter to Freiermuth, because they, at least right now, it doesn't look like they have the receiving core to keep up with an Ohio State team or a team in the playoff. It's just, they just don't have the same level of talent that Ohio State has, and I think they're going to be more focused on grinding games out with their solid defense and their running game.
And to kind of wrap up our conversation on Penn State, again, we're not going 20 minutes per school, and but Penn State being the big one, we'll spend a little extra time on them. That defense is really good, and Ohio State certainly has taken some offensive juggernauts into State College before and had issues. I mean, I think that turnovers mean a lot in this series as well. I mean, as with any game, you're not going to win a lot of games when you're -3, -4. I mean, save the Oregon National Championship game when the Buckeyes were -4 in that game. But it's not common, especially on the road in a true road game. But this game won't be a true road game in the sense of this whiteout on Halloween night that could have been insane in terms of atmosphere will be very much subdued. Penn State will have the same crowd laugh track that everybody else will have within this conference, 70 decibels during run of game, and then you can take it up to 90 during celebratory moments. If you're looking at Ohio State's fortunes, you're hoping that it doesn't get up to 90 decibels all that much. But, a very different environment than what people probably were hoping for 6-7 months ago.
Yes. I would say if there were fans, if they had a full capacity, I would certainly be a little more scared for Ohio State here. With no fans, I'm not sure how different home and away games are going to be. I mean, maybe the players are more comfortable at home, but I really couldn't tell you how much difference there is with no fans. Of course, Penn State is one of the toughest, if not the toughest place to play. So this season being this season, I think Ohio State, the fortunes were in their favor that this year ended up being an away Penn State game.
Yeah, you end up trading this away for Penn State game, and then we'll talk about Michigan later. Michigan's going to benefit at the end of the season coming into an empty Ohio Stadium, barring some major changes in terms of Big Ten rules and regulations, but I think it's going to be very difficult for them to make changes midway through. There'll be a lot of, that's screwing us, but, I digress. America's getting screwed by having to watch Rutgers play. How's that for a segue right there? Rutgers is going to be pretty bad, and Ohio State plays them week 3. Greg Schiano is now there. I think he's going to find tougher sledding as a member of the Big Ten at Rutgers than he was when Rutgers was part of the Big East. I think Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan are going to be much more formidable challengers than WVU and Pitt and whoever else was in that old Big East football conference. We're contractually obligated to have to talk about Rutgers, so let's just get this over with. What are your thoughts on Rutgers?
Well, Greg Schiano's fun, right? I mean, if you want to talk about the Ohio State aspect, they also have Brendan White, transfer safety from Ohio State. They're not going to be good. They're probably going to win 1, maybe 2 games. They still haven't proven themselves to be a Big Ten football team yet. They're going to be good in basketball, though, so there's that. I don't have much to say about Rutgers. It's not going to be pretty this season. It's not going to be pretty next season. I don't know when it's going to be pretty for them in the Big Ten.
And they also have Malik Barrow, who medically retired from Ohio State and then went to UCF and now is at Rutgers as well. No team was more active in the transfer portal, in my opinion, than Rutgers. I think it's a good thing that they're playing them pretty early in the season. I'm not going to say I don't want to be accused of being slanderous to any team or whatnot, but I think that they're going to stop having fun pretty quick, and you just don't know if they're going to be as cautious in terms of staying safe and everything else. And if there's a team that I think is likely to maybe run into an issue with COVID tests and contact tracing and everything else, Rutgers' proximity to New York City and everything else, I think it's just best to have them in week 3 rather than week 7 or week 8, because I don't know. It's gonna take a yeoman's job by Greg Schiano to keep this team invested and bought in, because it's just gonna be really bad when you look at the conference as a whole from 1 to 14, and I think the gap between 13 and 14 is as big as the gap as Ohio State at 1 to anybody really at 3 or 4. It's just a monstrous chasm, and it's going to take a lot of work for the Scarlet Knights to turn around, and we'll end our Rutgers hating session right there. Let's turn to Maryland. Ohio State will play Maryland in week 4, traveling to College Park. The Terps, they were a team that was really hurt by players opting out, and unless things happened under the radar, I don't think any of them really opted back in. So you take a team that's probably at best 6th in the conference in the division, and you take 5-6 players off of there. That's just bad news.
It is. As big as you said the gap is between 13 and 14, I personally think the gap between 12 and 13 is almost as big. With those opt-outs, Maryland, they're not going to be good this year. They brought in Tagliavoia, which is exciting in the future. I don't know. It depends if he's eligible this year. It depends if he plays this year. I don't even think that will make a difference. But they're certainly better than Rutgers. So that's a 1 win on the schedule for them. They should be a little more competitive than Rutgers. But again, it's probably for the better that Ohio State gets them out of the way in the first half of the season.
Yeah, the Terps, I don't know. I think they're a heck of a lot closer than Rutgers, but it's going to come down to Mike Loxley being able to keep talent at home. And while they're landing some kids, I think we're seeing too many leave, and I don't know. They're closer. That's about all I can say at this point, but Ohio State certainly runs into a couple of weeks where they should be able to play a lot of players, and that ends our hating on Maryland segment right there. So now we're going to finish up the first segment of our show. We're talking about the Indiana Hoosiers, and they are an interesting team to me based on the fact that Michael Penix Jr. I think he is a really underrated quarterback. I like the job that Tom Allen has done there. Indiana is coming off of a surprising season to me last year. I don't know if they're going to be a team that's going to be able to keep it up, but they're enjoyable to watch. When I sit there and I'm done watching an Ohio State game or working an Ohio State game, and they're in the next segment, then that next block of games, I enjoy watching them play a Michigan State. I enjoy watching them play in Illinois. I enjoy watching them play Nebraska or whatever. They're just a fun team to watch.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when's the last time you can say Indiana is fun? I did enjoy watching them play last year. I think Penix was good last year before he got hurt, and he's going to be really good this year. They have weapons on offense. They're going to throw the ball a lot. They have a wide receiver, Wap Fillier, who's good. Hendershot at tight end is also good. The defense was really young last year. It's still not going to be very good this year, but they're going to put up points, I think. And in the Big Ten, putting up points isn't always a guarantee. So this team will be fun. They'll be fun to watch. They'll be pretty explosive on offense behind Penix. And I think if he takes a step forward, they could pull out a number 3 spot in the East this season.
Now, one of the things you have to remember about Indiana, talking about that young defense, losing Marcelino Ball, their talented defensive back, that's a pretty huge loss for them at this point, as you're talking about a team that was inconsistent. And I think that's about the nicest way I can say it. Inconsistent on defense last year. And then you remove a player that was that critical to their defensive effort. And that's obviously a big issue for them to have to try and overcome.
Yeah, the defense is definitely the biggest thing to look at, especially losing Ball. I mean, you said they weren't consistent last year, and he was maybe the one consistent on the defense. Without him back there needs to be some growth in the youth. They need to pick it up quickly because they're going straight into Big Ten play, straight into playing at Penn State, or no, home against Penn State. But still, either way, you have to pick it up quick when that's your first game.
I mean, I have their defensive numbers in front of me, and they weren't as bad as I remember, but, I think the problem is that being part of the Big Ten, by being in the 40s and 50s nationally, isn't necessarily going to get you there. They were 45th in scoring defense, allowing about 24.5 points. They were, here's total defense. They were 36th, 352 yardage. I just don't think it's going to be enough to get it done in the conference. But, again, a fun team to watch, and Ohio State draws them at home around the midway point of the season. We're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk about the final 2 teams out of the Big Ten East, Michigan State, and that team up north, and we'll kind of go over a couple of things we got from a Ryan Day conference call earlier this week as well. All of that on the flip side here on your BIA podcast. Hague Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com. Welcome back to the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I am joined by Marcus Horton, and we are talking about the Big Ten East. We skip over the Illinois game as we talked about the Big Ten West already, and we're now at December 5th and a trip to Michigan State, and the Spartans certainly are going to be a team in transition. Gone is Mark D'Antonio, in comes Mel Tucker. A team that wasn't very good last year. We're not even going to kind of get into a lot of the other issues of Mark D'Antonio running into some, and the program running into some issues with Curtis Blackwell, a former assistant, and whatnot. it's a team that always seemed to do a good job with a lot of 2 and 3 stars until it didn't. And now you're dealing with a team that couldn't tell you who their starting quarterback's going to be. Rocky Lombardi, maybe a young guy. I really can't tell you much of much. They're certainly separated from a run of some pretty good college quarterbacks that have come through that have gone on to have surprisingly long NFL careers, a run of running backs that would go on to the league. And, they really hung their hat on their defense. And I don't really see any of that going into this season.
Yeah, I think that what you said is kind of the thing about Michigan State this season. You don't know much about them this season. I think it's more about the future. I think Mel Tucker was a good hire. I think this year is not going to be easy. They don't really have the talent to keep up with the top half of the East, but they will. I think Mel Tucker will get them there. Their roster's not great this season. They don't bring in the best recruiting class next season. But like you said, D'Antoni did a great job with 2 and 3 star recruits until he didn't. And it was a much needed change this season, I think. I think it's a fresh coach. He's a younger guy. D'Antoni's time had kind of expired. I mean, he was a little bit on the decline those last few years. So if Tucker can pull in a few better recruiting classes the next few seasons, I think that's what it's about. This season is it's purely a transition year.
Yeah, I mean, and the timing of D'Antonio's departure was I think it was surprising. I don't remember exactly where I was, but I know I was on the road, I believe, covering basketball or something. No, I don't even know. I just know I was on the road, and I heard about the news coming up on, I guess it was basketball because it was still during the Big Ten season, about this sudden departure, and it was like, wow, what next? But I think that they are going to run into a bit of an issue when it comes into recruiting because, I mean, let's be honest, I can't really remember. I mean, I remember them winning some recruiting battles. They can beat Michigan in the state of Michigan for some kids. They've been, and when there are 4 and 5 star kids in Michigan, they're going to have a crack at them. But beyond that, I don't know. They just haven't won a lot of those head-to-head recruiting battles when they've been fighting in their own weight class, or more importantly, fighting above their weight class. And I don't know. I think one of the biggest issues, too, is Michigan State had a lot of success when it was recruiting the state of Ohio well. Kentucky then came in out of the SEC and started recruiting Ohio well and pulled all the kids that normally would have ended up in Michigan State and Illinois and whatnot. And I think you saw those types of programs take a bit of a step back when they weren't able to come into Ohio and land some of these kids. So I just don't know if Mel Tucker's going to be able to resuscitate that type of recruiting plan. And I know we're really getting away from what is Michigan State going to look like here in 2020, and we're talking larger picture things, but when I think we both have passed judgment that they're not going to be very good, and we need to kind of talk about what the future is going to be because the present is going to be pretty painful.
Yeah, it's more about the future, and I think Tucker is going to either have to build a recruiting culture, which it's certainly possible that he gets back Ohio State and builds somewhat of a culture there, but he's either going to have to do that or he's going to have to kind of take the D'Antonio route and do more with less, which is not easy, especially for a 48-year-old second-year head coach like Tucker.
Well, let's move on to the finale, the team that all Ohio State fans care about. Not saying they like them, but that they care about what the situation is, and that's the Michigan Wolverines. Some crazy things going on up in Ann Arbor right now in terms of there's like a stay-in-place order for students because of COVID outbreaks or whatnot, but, none of that really matters in terms of us talking about our preview of what the team is going to look like. Joe Milton is going to be the quarterback now. He won the battle in terms of camp. I've heard all of these comparisons that he's Cam Newton, he's William Wallace from Braveheart, he's, Zeus. I mean, I think that the August, September hype machine that normally runs around Ann Arbor now has been delayed to October just based on the calendar. I know what I've seen out of Joe Milton, and it hasn't necessarily been pretty outside of what he was able to do in some garbage time against Rutgers. Let's kind of start with the quarterback as we do a little bit more of an expanded talk about Michigan.
Well, Milton's big, so that's a plus in his favor. From what I've heard, he's hit or miss. He's gonna be exciting at times. He's gonna make big plays at times, but he's also gonna turn the ball over, and he's gonna make some head scratchers. I mean, for Michigan, I think he's the guy. He has to be the guy. If you give him a season and a half, I think he'll be good. I think he'll be one of the best Michigan quarterbacks in recent memory. He certainly has the potential to be. Now that it's his job, he can focus on just being the Michigan quarterback. And I think the potential is certainly there.
Well, he better be the guy because Dylan McCaffrey transferred out. So
yeah,
if Joe Milton isn't the guy, then I don't know what's going to happen. Jim Harbaugh's probably a little long in the tooth to sit there and suit up himself, and probably out of eligibility as well. They get a pretty big addition back to the team. They lost Chris Evans due to some academic issues last year. He'll be back. I think he's immediately becomes the best running back on that roster. Their running game wasn't necessarily getting it done last season. I don't see Chris Evans being a guy who becomes just this feature bell cow type of running back for them, but I think he gives them a lot more in the running game than what they were dealing with last year.
Yeah, they certainly have a lot more with Evans. I mean, Charbonnet and Haskins weren't spectacular. They were solid. They're going to be solid behind him. The offense should be better with the addition of a solid run game. It depends on Milton being able to make the throws to those wide receivers. The defense will be good again. They have a solid defense. They have a solid front line. But once again, you kind of hear that every year with the Michigan hype train, and we're kind of taking part in the Michigan hype train by talking about every area being good.
Well, I don't know. Don't put any words in my mouth. One last thing on the offensive side as we try to push through this. They have taken some major hits at wide receiver. Tariq Black has transferred to Texas. Nico Collins is not back. I mean, DPJ is now playing in the NFL. I mean, they don't have the names at receiver that we are used to seeing. That doesn't mean that they're devoid of talent, but they had this like triumvirate of great receivers, and it just seemed like they never knew how to use them. Well, it doesn't matter. They don't have to figure out how to use them now because they're gone.
Yeah. Nico Collins was big. I think Milton would have gone to him often he would have been the big play target for Milton. I think Ronnie Bell can still be good, but you're right. They don't have those names that we are used to Michigan having, and with maybe an explosive quarterback in Milton, it would be nice to have that experience and those big play players back.
We'll just gloss quickly over the defense as we're running out of time here on the BIA podcast. Once again, I'm your host Kevin Noon, joined by by Marcus Horton. It's been a long night. What are your thoughts on their defense? They lose a lot over there as well. We see, I think it's a Jekyll and Hyde type of defensive situation. They dominate teams defensively that they should dominate, and then lo and behold, Ohio State comes in and hangs half 100 on them.
Yes, it's you don't really know. I mean, the front should be good. Hutchinson and Pay should be great up front. They can get pressure on opposing teams. The linebacker core is good. It's experienced. But it seems like they perform when they should perform. And when there's high stakes or when maybe they're not favored or they're away, which won't matter this season, it kind of falls apart. So I think consistency is the key under Don Brown. I mean, we've heard the Don Brown love, but until they can do it in every game for 4 quarters, no matter how much talent they have, I'm going to be a little distrustful.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. That game won't happen until mid-December, so it'll be interesting to watch. We're not going to have time to get to our Ryan Day conversation at this point, as we went a little bit long here, and I got to get this podcast turned and posted. But any final thoughts out of what's going on in terms of the Big Ten East, Marcus, before I put this show on lockdown?
One big thing: Week 1, Michigan at Minnesota. That could define Michigan's season. That's my last thing.
Well, I think you're right on there too, and I appreciate you being part of the show, and I appreciate everybody else for listening along. Once again, I want to thank Marcus Horton for joining us. I am your host, Kevin Noon, and this is the BIA podcast, and we will talk to you very soon.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game, exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to click on that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing, and come visit us over at BuckeyeGrove.com for all the best Ohio State information on the web.